Hey.
I tried to click on
Yes. I hear that it is that credit card.java is broken. I think it will not be broken, but it's actually good because we're gonna like build it in class, so now you can't.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I need to make sure that I get the project right. Have one day straight because that happens.
All right, everybody, welcome to class. Happy Friday. Also, happy first day that kind of feels like fall. I went into the Albertsons to buy my dog hot dogs for treats, and the Starbucks had pumpkin spice lattes, which normally, like, I don't even know that I've had a pumpkin spice latte, but I was actually like, you know what? I feel okay with this. Like, I'm so happy that fall is maybe coming. So, so happy day for me. Hopefully everyone's happy because it's Friday at least. Did everybody see the bunch of announcements that I made on Discord this morning? I'm seeing some nods. Not that, I'm posting there pretty frequently as I'm updating things, but I wanted to point out some of those things. So one big one, or two sort of announcements there were about Project 1. First off, I had forgotten until on Wednesday when I actually talked about Project 1 in class, I'd forgotten that I didn't define the rules around doing the projects with a partner. So now there is information about doing the project with a partner. Basically, you can have one partner for this. My hope is that if you do it with a partner, you're going to do what we call pair programming, meaning you're both going to sit down, work on it together, rather than, just having one person write the whole thing. That would be really bad. But rather than like having one person write half of it and then passing it off the other person and that person writing the other half, I would rather that you are sitting together and working on it. And that's how we do the group projects. But this is an option. Logistically, if you do this with a partner, you should have one partner turn in your files on D2L, and the other person should submit a comment by the due date to D2L that says who your partner is, and then whoever submitted the Java files, the TA for that person will grade. So even if it's okay if you're in different sections, but those are the logistics for partner projects. Are there any questions about that? That looks like a hand. Yeah.
I have a question about Project 1.
Sure.
So I use the map module.
Yeah.
You can use the log function for that and stuff. But
Yes.
it's possible to enter a value to that and it just returns not a number.
You're
do we
right.
need to account for that, or is that something that hey?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. And the answer is no, you don't need to account for that. Yeah. I did not think about that, but yeah, that is something that can come up as you're programming. For this project, you don't need to worry about that. But thanks for pointing it out, because I actually hadn't even thought of that.
For testing your code.
Yeah, no, nice job testing your code. Another thing that I did was previously in the grading, it talked about Javadoc comments. So Javadoc is a way that you can automatically, if you format your comments in a certain way, they can automatically be made into basically the web page. It will generate the HTML to make your documentation like the documentation on the website for Java. And in fact, that's how that's generated as well. So that's a really cool thing, but I checked, and it's not required that we cover it in this class. And so because I want to focus more on the code, for now, we're not going to cover it. We might get to it later in the class, but now you're not required to do Javadoc comments on this project. However, 20 out of 80 points, 20 out of 100 points is still going to go toward readable code, nice comments. I added some things that you can think about. It's not that you have to hit all these to get full points, but these are some things that can guide you Basically, before you turn your assignment in, try to finish the assignment before the due date, and then sometime after that, come back to it. Think about, could you have done anything more simply? Is anything confusing and needs a comment before you turn it in? Any questions about that? Yeah. Yeah, you can still do the Java.comments. We're just not going to cover them. We're not necessarily going to cover them before this is due. So I just want to make sure you have time. Yeah.
Do you think it would be a good idea to comment every single method, or maybe a blanket comment for all?
So personally, I like to organize my as I'm writing, I like to, organize myself by saying, okay, here's where I'm going to put my fields, here's where I'm going to put my constructors, here's where I'm going to put my methods. I do think that's a nice thing to do. I don't think you need a comment for every method. If it's just a getter method, for example, like the name, you should only comment if it does something other than, if it does something in addition to getting the field that, if it's different from what someone who might be using your class would expect or looking at your code would expect, then write a comment. But if the method name totally describes what it does, then you don't have to write a comment. Cool. I think the other announcements were Lab 3 is up. It's about inheritance, which we won't cover till next week, but if you want to look ahead in the book, you're welcome to do that. Cool. So for today, we are going to kind of, in a way, summarize and just get more practice with what we've been doing with our object-oriented programming. I'm also going to start adding what section of the textbook we are working out of each day. Just didn't think to do that before, so if you have the textbook and you're following along, today this credit card program is actually in the textbook in 1.7. So actually, let me grab my notes for today just to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Cool. Great. So what we're going to do today is build up a new class. So we've really been beating our counter class to death. So let's do something more interesting. We're going to make a class that's going to represent a credit card. And we're going to build up these files. We're actually going to start with a blank file, so you don't need to open these yet. But let's open Eclipse. I'm going to make a new package for day 7. And I'm going to make a new class in here. I'm going to call it credit card. This is just going to be my class definition, so I'm not going to tell it to make me a main or anything like that. But I do get my credit card. So let's think, if I want to make a class representing a credit card, we're not even going to write any code yet, but what are some information that we might want to store about a credit card, or what kind of methods are we going to want? I see the first hand I saw was, yeah, things like, I'm just going to write some ideas. So we got the credit card number. Let's get another idea. I saw a hand here.
Security code.
Security code, nice. And then we can really use this thing on a website. That's awesome. Yeah.
The name on the card.
Yeah. Name. I saw another hand over here.
Expiration date.
Expiration date. These are awesome. How about one more? I saw Jasmine, your hand. Yeah, the bank. And what about some methods? Like, what kind of things do we need to be able to do with our credit card? Yeah. What was that? Oh, yeah. Yeah, so we also want things like a balance. That's a good idea. Okay, so these will be like ideas for fields. How about some ideas for methods? And maybe once we have some ideas for our methods, we'll realize some fields that we actually really needed. Yeah.
Adding
yeah, like make a charge and then something like pay off the card. Yeah, maybe. Any other, how about let's get one more method idea that we might want to have. Sure, yeah, renew, yeah, like, once that expiration date comes, we got to renew it. So yeah, these are great ideas. And we will come back to actually implementing this. But just like we've done, so part of, we're gonna get some practice writing our class, but I also want to show what I think a good incremental way to build up your program. So if you're working on a lab or a project, basically what I like to do when I'm programming is every time I make a change, I want to test that my program runs. Especially if I'm learning a new language or like coming back to a language I haven't used, anything like that. Once I get really confident, maybe I can make multiple changes before running it, but when I'm learning something new, I do want to just make small changes, run, small change, run. So I'm also going to make a credit card demo class. And for this one, I'm going to check that I want my main. And so if you've looked at the book or at the file on the website, you know that our goal with this is to make an array of credit cards. So in our credit card demo, we'd like to do that, and then make some charges, and then print out the balance and card info. So this is my goal. Like, this might be something that if I'm working on a lab, I know what I need to do in the lab. I need to make some animal objects. I need to set their attributes, and I need to print them out. But just because that's my goal doesn't mean that I should immediately start writing all that code. I like to start with something simple. And so I'm going to delete this comment here. And so if it was me, even though I know that I want to be able to do all these things, the first thing that I want to do is just create a single credit card with minimal functionality. So can anyone tell me let's say I want to make a credit card and my variable name is going to be C. So even though we haven't written any code in here, we just have some ideas about what we might want it to do, I claim that we still have enough information to write down to declare and initialize a credit card with a variable named C. Anybody want to tell me what the code to do that would be? Yeah, right here.
You could do like credit card C and then C new credit card.
Yeah, so exactly. I know I want to call it C. I guess I know I want to call it C. I know its type is going to be credit card. Even though I don't have any code in my credit card class, it's already, that's fixed. And then we always use the new keyword, and then we're going to have to call a constructor. And it actually turns out that Java will infer, like, even though I have no code in here, if I don't have any constructors, it will just infer that I want to set all my fields to their default values. So this will actually run. It's not, I don't get any output, nothing happened, but this code runs right now. And so I'm in a good spot to make a small change and check that my code runs. Does this make sense? Any questions right now? Cool. So, great. Let's start trying to implement some of these ideas. So I'm going to just let this be at the bottom of my file. So can anyone tell me the 3 things that I'm going to need to define for my class. I actually talked about these earlier, but yeah. Yeah, so that's, for the purpose of our class, I always think of, I'm going to need some fields, I'm going to need some constructors, and I'm going to need some methods. And a lot of times, it makes sense to start with my fields, because I'm going to need those for my constructors and methods. But also, even if, like, we listed a lot of fields here, right? And there are probably even more that we might want to add. But another good practice, I think, is to only add in what you're going to use for sort of the next thing you're going to implement. I guess for us, a lot of time, I guess if we're making a constructor, we do need a lot of fields. But we can always add in fields later, right? If you don't really know how you're going to use the, let's say, expiration date in your program, you can always add it in later. We don't have to add it in right now. So just to follow what the book does, we're going to start with some, 5 fields. And can someone remind me if I only want to be able to access these fields within my class definition, what keyword or what modifier should I use? Yeah, Jesse?
Private.
Yeah, so let's make these private. I'm just going to use the ones from the book. It's not very exciting, but the book has a customer, so to me this made more sense as name, but we'll match the book and we'll use customer. Book also has bank. That makes a lot of sense. What bank is your card from? Also account. So, for them, this is like those 4, 3, 4, 5, 8, credit cards have these 4-digit, these long strings of 4 numbers. They store this as a string. They also have a limit for your credit limit, like how much can you put on the card, and also a balance. And so I'm going to make this a bit bigger. Great. And so let's say I want to define a constructor that's going to set all of these fields. We can set all of them. And can anybody tell me what I should write to do that? Yeah.
Public credit card.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with public credit card, and then I'm going to need to pass in, I want to define all of them, right? So I'm going to have to pass in values for all of these. So I definitely need I'm going to need to pass in my customer name, the bank, the account which is also a string. I'll put this on didn't like it when I did that. Okay. The limit, and the balance. And so now, let's say I want to set my customer field to the value cust. Well, what I would need to do, just set that, right? Not that exciting. So we can just go ahead, do that for all. Account equals account, limit equals lim, and balance equals bal. And so now I have this constructor defined, and you probably can't see it, but there's an error. Okay, now if we hop over here, there's an error. So why am I getting an error now? Yeah. Yeah, so now that I've actually defined a constructor, Java's not inferring the default one. So it's saying, hey, you're calling the constructor, but it's not defined to take nothing. It's defined to actually take 5 things. So let's fix this. I'm just going to put in some silly ones. So let's remember our order. It's customer, bank, account, limit, balance. So customer, bank, let's call it Bank of America. We've got our account number. It's just going to be 1,000. And then we have our credit limit. Let's give this guy $50,000. Nice. And and what? Let's start his balance at 0. Okay, so now I've passed in 5 things. They match the type of my definition, because I said I need 3 strings in a row, an int, a double. I guess it's happy to take 0 as a double, but I could also do 0.0. And now I should be able to run it. And again, no output, but I know that, or I have a good sign that my constructor is working how I want it to work. Any questions right now? Cool. So let's see, what's our time looking like? We're going to take less than 10 minutes, and first we're going to find a partner, and then we are going to implement a method to make a charge to our credit card. So I'm going to show you how we're going to call it. So here, I'll say with partner, write a charge method. So we'll call it by saying, how would we call it? Anyone want to tell me?
Public charge, parentheses, and then brackets.
So that's how we would define it, but how do we call it? I'm in the demo.
Dot method?
Yeah, exactly. Here, let's.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. What was that?
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say C dot charge or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And let's say that charge is going to take in a double. Let's say I'm going to charge $56.87. And so this is how we're going to call it. You can see I got an error because I haven't implemented it. And before we get into this, if you finish this really fast, you can check that the credit card, has like extra. We'll say decline the charge if balance would go over limit, right? So we have both a balance and a limit, and I shouldn't be able to accept that charge if it would put me over my credit limit. But first, you should do the basic version where you just do the charge, meaning you add it to the balance. And then once you've got that working, then you can move on to the extra. So first, before you start working, if you aren't following along, I would like you to find a partner. You have a question.
Would you like us also with the charge function to return some type of error message if there isn't a balance to be charged?
I would say if you get there, you can decide. Okay, if you're not able to run anything, do find a partner. If you're able to run things, you can do it by yourself, but if you're running into trouble, ask the person next to you. Go for it. I will come around and help if needed. If you don't know where to start, definitely talk to the person next to you.
Right.
Yeah.
So
you want to change what the balance on your loss is, but you don't need to return anything. Okay. So you want to that's the okay. So I would only be using yeah. I'm thinking yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that's one.
So if you're moving a double, you need to call your double and then call it your yeah. Yep. Perfect. Well, I have to also
Yeah. No problem. It just helps out others. Yeah.
All together going, what am I doing at this point?
So I think I think what one is not to setting goal after your because you have it. Yeah. Okay, so that's function you do now. Yeah. I'm with what's going on, but I'm not taking myself, so I'm flying on YouTube for that part.
Sometimes you actually can stuff by trying to teach to somebody else.
Yeah.
It should be basically the same topic.
Yeah, exactly. And then we want to do decline the charge if the balance will go a little linear. Okay. So for that, we have to say.
That would be an interesting. So wait, can you do an interesting?
Yeah. You would do it above, so you have your text as rockable line, but you have to make a code block for. So let's go and just like return. Yeah. Yep. And so that the balance equals val is going to be true if the charge is greater than, you have to have like an operator, or if the balance is greater than the charge.
So it has to be like if balance after the charge is still greater than 0. That's true.
Yep. That means
If balance else, then false, which false.
yeah. So if this, do this.
If balance
Charge.
Okay, so that's what so here's what I do.
So that's
I
what
want
you
to
have to do.
go back to yeah, now just run it and then okay. Now maybe
Then you just want to do it. Then you just want to actually do the balance. Yeah.
maybe make it
So I think yeah.
no, here, will you, I mean, we don't want it to be right. Yeah. Here, let me scroll up. So this is the last definition. And so main is just for the driver classes. Yeah. So now save it. Okay, so now I bet you can just comment. That's right. But I hope it'll work. Okay, thank you.
Else,
what happened to the charge? It's during, you can just tell
Oh.
them to turn.
All right. right, let's bring it back together. So, anybody want to tell me? So just for the first version, where all we're doing is deducting the charge from our balance. What's my method going to look like? How about someone I haven't heard from today? Yeah.
Public void charge takes in double.
Mm-hmm.
Subtract U balance minus equals the amount.
Yeah. Awesome. And so I would run this. Okay, nothing's happening. Maybe sometimes, or it's good it runs. Sometimes I like to add maybe a getter just so that I can check myself. So I'm going to say I'm going to get balance maybe, just so that I can print my balance. So I'm going to return balance. Oh, yes. Balance is a double. And now maybe I can print out c.getBalance. And we can see that hopefully, great. Yeah, my balance is negative. That makes a lot of sense. So it looks like we did that right. Awesome. Any questions on that? Okay, anybody want to tell me how we can update this charge method to check that we're not going over our limit? Another person I haven't heard from today, maybe? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I can use an if statement. Let's say check that this charge won't go over limit. So our syntax for our if statements, we say if, and then we're going to put our condition, and then we're going to have to use, well, if it's more than one line, we can use curly brackets to offset it. So I'll just put that here. So what do you put in your if statement?
If like balance is greater than or equal to amount, then you can subtract, but else
Yeah.
something that says you can't do that.
Yeah, and so I guess if I'm in this, so currently we've implemented charge so that our balance becomes negative, which totally makes sense. We could have also implemented this so that my balance becomes positive. And so then, if my balance was becoming positive, then my balance would be positive, and so it would make sense to say something like, as long as my balance is balance plus amount, right? Because I don't want to go over my limit. As long as my balance plus my amount is less than my limit, maybe less than or equal to, then I should make the charge, which was this code, right? And otherwise, don't do anything. So let's see. In this case, we would make the charge. But let's say that I try to charge $100,000. Let's see if I run this. Hopefully, yep, it declined the charge. I didn't implement anything to tell me that it declined the charge, but it did decline the charge. Your book also does this slightly differently. You could also imagine having to do something different if you did have your balance going negative. But we will leave it here for now, because I also wanted to show a UML diagram. Has anybody heard of a UML diagram before? No. Okay, that's awesome. So this is just an established way that we can describe a class. So I'm going to try to plug in my iPad, and yes, it's working. It's looking great. Okay, so how can you see my iPad on there? So a UML diagram is, like I said, a way that we can describe our class. So we're always going to have 3 sections. At the top, we have the name of our class. So for example, our class is credit card. And then we have a section where we write down our fields and a section where we write down our methods. And we're not going to go into all the details today, but two things to start with are that we denote our fields if they're public with a plus and if they're private with a minus. So can someone remind me, or maybe I won't even ask you to remind me, I will just go over here to my credit card. So for example, in my credit card class, one of my fields is customer, and so I'm going to list that with a minus, and then I'm going to write a colon and put the type. So this is a string. Oh, blast. You're right. Thank you. Okay, there we go. Now you can see it. So I denoted it with a minus, and I used a colon and put the type. We also have, I believe, the bank. That's also a string. We had the account, something like that. Go like this, and I'll come back this time. Account was a string. And then we had limit, which was an int. And we had balance, which was a double. Are there any questions about that? Great. So now, just looking at the UML diagram, you have some idea of what this credit card class is. For our methods, we also use these same public and private ways of designating with the plus and the minus. So can anyone tell me, just going along with what we've seen already, what we have defined the charge? So I guess I'll just write it down. Since charge was public, I would write charge. And then because it's a method, I can write down, it's optional, but I can write down what it takes in and what it returns. So this takes in, what did charge take in? It took in the amount, I believe. Yeah, a double amount. So amount, which was a double. Oh, thank you. Not practiced. Okay, amount, which was a double. And then I didn't give myself very much space, so actually I'm going to erase this. This is probably what it's like to be like an elementary school teacher and you're like writing on the board all the time. Actually, they're probably really good at this. Okay, so we had amount, yeah, which was a double. And what did it return? I believe it returns void. Let's go check it. Yep, it returns void. Putting this guy back up. And it returns void. So that is how I indicate my methods. If I had any static methods, which the books version of the credit card class does have a static method, so you can check that out, I would underline. So, if I had an example method here, it would be underlined. I also provided on the page for this lecture, there's a nice explanation of UML diagrams. in a video, so you can check that out if you want. And where are we at on time? Perfect, I would say. So, any questions right now about UML diagrams? One thing, when you finish the major, I think you take a little quiz to see what you learned. And at our first faculty meeting this year, people were talking about how nobody knew about UML diagrams. So trying to help change that. But this will come, I believe this might come up on the quiz when you're graduating. You don't have to pass the quiz or anything. It's just so that we as teachers know whether we actually got anything into your brains. But anyway, hopefully in 3 years or 2 years or whenever you graduate, you do me proud. Anyway, we got a couple more minutes. So I would like you, again, if you'd like to work with a partner, you can. You can also work by yourself. Open up a new file in Eclipse or in whatever your IDE is, and quickly start implementing the employee class based on this UML diagram. I guess I gotta put it back up for you. And we'll just spend 4 minutes on this, so we'll get out of class 5 minutes early. But if there are any questions, I'm ready to answer them. Or if possibly I made a mistake and this doesn't even specify everything fully. Yeah, it could happen. Yeah. So my understanding is if you have constructors that take in parameters, then you probably would actually put them in the UML diagram. So yeah, that is missing here. Yeah, I forgot the constructor, so you can write whatever constructor you want.
Nice.
Yeah. We're not going to just giving you a chance to see if you actually, So yeah, it doesn't matter where you put this file. You can write on a piece of paper. Oh god, I want to make this. There we go. All right, so I put what I think this UML diagram is telling me on here. I wanted to stick with my word, let's get it out 5 minutes early. So this is what I see from that. You can let me know if you have any questions, but otherwise, happy Friday, and have a good weekend, and I will see you on Monday.
Hey, how are you? Mine is